Welcome, everyone. This channel isn't just about me, it's about us. A place where we share ideas, connect, and grow together through every video. If you want to be part of a positive and supportive community, hit subscribe and let's build something great together.
The bookcase was almost perfect. I'd been working on it for 3 weeks. Solid black walnut, hand-cut dovetails at every joint, the kind of piece you build once and never sell. My workshop smelled like sawdust and linseed oil, and the late October light was coming through the garage windows at that golden angle that makes everything look like it's been painted. I had the radio on low and a cold beer within reach, and for about 20 minutes on that Saturday afternoon, my life felt exactly right. Then Emma came running in. She's 9 years old, my sister Pam's daughter, staying with us for the weekend while Pam and her husband were in Nashville for their anniversary. Emma is a quiet kid, observant, careful. The kind of child who notices everything and says very little until she has something worth saying. She was holding my wife's iPad the way you hold something that doesn't belong to you. "Uncle Marcus," she said, stopping in the doorway. "Aunt Sandra left this on the couch and went to take a shower. It keeps buzzing and buzzing. There's a lot of messages from someone named Kyle." She held it out. "There's like 100 little heart things." I set down my hand plane. I wiped my palms on my jeans, which wasn't necessary because they weren't dirty. Old reflex. I took the iPad from Emma and told her to go pick something on Netflix that I'd make popcorn in a few minutes. She nodded and left, already moving on to the next thing the way kids do. The screen unlocked when Emma handed it to me. Sandra had used the same 4-digit passcode for everything since the day we met 12 years ago, her grandmother's birthday, which she'd told me on our third date like she was giving me something valuable. There were 43 unread messages in the thread. The contact was listed simply as K with a blue diamond emoji. The most recent one, sent 20 minutes ago, "Miss you already. Monday still work?" Sandra's reply, sent while I was standing 15 feet away in the garage, "Should be fine. Marcus has a delivery run to Knoxville. I'll text you when he leaves." I read it twice. Then I scrolled up. I read for 8 minutes without moving, standing in my garage in my work boots with a half-finished bookcase behind me that suddenly felt like the most useless thing I'd ever made. The messages went back 6 months in that thread alone, but the tone of them, comfortable, routine, familiar, told me this wasn't new. People who are new to each other don't communicate like that. That ease was built over time. I put the iPad face down on my workbench. I picked up my hand plane. I kept working on the bookcase. Sandra came out to the garage an hour later, hair damp from the shower, wearing the gray pullover I'd given her 2 Christmases ago. She stood in the doorway watching me for a moment. "You eat anything?" I was thinking about ordering Thai. "Sounds good," I said without turning around. "The usual?" "Sure." She went back inside. I listened to the sound of her footsteps on the kitchen floor until they stopped. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark next to her and listened to her breathe and thought about the grain of black walnut, how it runs deep and honest through the wood, how you can sand a walnut board 100 times and the grain is always there, showing through everything, telling you the exact truth about what the tree actually was. You cannot sand the truth out of walnut. You can only reveal more of it. I thought about 12 years of a marriage I'd believed in without question. I thought about the delivery I had scheduled in Knoxville on Monday. I didn't go to Knoxville on Monday. I rescheduled with my client, drove the furniture to my downtown shop, and spent the day at a coffee shop on Market Street going through our joint bank account statements on my laptop. The withdrawals had a story of their own. Restaurants I'd never been to, a hotel receipt in Asheville from August when Sandra had told me she was attending a regional real estate conference, a jewelry store charge for a bracelet I had never once seen on her wrist. I printed everything, folded it into an envelope, and put it in my jacket pocket. My neighbor Frank Decker had lived next door for 6 years. He was 63, retired after 22 years as an investigator for the Chattanooga Police Department, and spent his days growing tomatoes and drinking his coffee black on the front porch. He had the slowest, most deliberate way of speaking I'd ever encountered in a person. Like every single word was inspected before it was released. He'd helped me pour a concrete pad in my backyard the summer before, and we'd been having beers over the fence ever since. I knocked on his door Monday evening. He took one look at my face and said, "Come in, I'll put on coffee." I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which is rarer than most people think. When I finished, he looked at his coffee mug for a while. "You love her?" he asked. "I thought I did." He nodded. "That's not the same answer, but it's honest." He set down the mug. "Okay, here's what you do. You don't move any money. Don't confront anyone. Don't change your behavior in any way that tips your hand. You call a divorce attorney tomorrow morning, not this week, tomorrow. And then you let me help you do this the right way. What does the right way look like? He smiled. Small, unhurried. The smile of someone who's seen enough to be patient about almost everything. Slow, thorough, and legal. The kind that holds up. Attorney Linda Marsh had an office above a bookstore on Market Street, and she had the kind of quiet competence that makes complicated things feel manageable. I told her everything, including the bank statements. She took notes in small, careful handwriting on a yellow legal pad. Tennessee is a fault state, she said. Adultery affects asset division substantially. How long have you owned the house? Before the marriage. I've been paying the mortgage alone the whole time. She made a note. Good. One more question. She set down her pen and looked at me directly. Any possibility your wife might be pregnant? She hasn't said anything. Watch for signs. If she is pregnant and names you as the father, your legal exposure becomes significant. There's a non-invasive prenatal paternity test that works as early as 7 or 8 weeks. Blood draw from the mother, no risk, fully admissible. If it becomes relevant, we'll move quickly. I drove home and cooked dinner, the same way I'd been cooking dinner 3 nights a week for 12 years. Sandra sat across from me and talked about a listing she had in Red Bank, asked whether I wanted to watch something afterward. I said sure. We watched an episode of some British baking competition she liked. She fell asleep on the couch with her head on my shoulder. I stared at the ceiling and thought about walnut grain. Frank and I spent the following 2 weeks being methodical about it. He'd taught me the difference between watching and surveilling, which came down mostly to patience and refusing to let your emotions make your decisions for you. We documented Kyle's truck, black-lifted F-250, just like Sandra's texts had described, parked in front of our house on a Tuesday afternoon when I was supposed to be in Atlanta for a regional furniture trade show. I wasn't in Atlanta. I was parked 2 blocks down with Frank's old Nikon and a telephoto lens he'd used on actual police cases. We documented dinner at a restaurant on Lookout Mountain on a Thursday evening. Frank at a table nearby, me in the parking lot with a long lens and a thermal coffee. We documented 3 other visits over 10 days. Each one time-stamped, photographed, entered into the folder Frank maintained with the same precision he'd use on homicide cases. Kyle Hurst, I learned, ran a landscaping company and lived in a rental near the North Shore. He had a habit of posting his location on Instagram stories when he was in a good mood, which he frequently was, which made our job substantially easier. He also had a girlfriend, a woman named Stephanie, whom I identified from his social media, who apparently did not know about my wife, just as my wife apparently did not know about Stephanie. Kyle was the kind of man who kept all his plates spinning by never letting them see each other. She's been good at this, Frank said one evening, compartmentalizing, keeping the routine stable. That kind of discipline doesn't appear overnight. She's been doing this a long time. The bank records bore that out. The earliest withdrawal I could connect to Kyle, a restaurant I cross-referenced with her Instagram location history, was 22 months ago. 22 months. Our anniversary trip to Savannah was 20 months ago. I'd spent 3 weeks planning that trip. 3 weeks after I'd hired Linda, started documenting, Sandra called me from work. There was a particular brightness in her voice that I'd learned to read. The tone she used when she was managing something and trying to seem natural about it. I need to talk tonight, she said. I have something to tell you. I think it's good news. It's just unexpected. I knew before she said it. She was 9 weeks along. She sat across from our kitchen table with both hands around a mug of chamomile tea and told me she'd found out 2 days ago that it was a complete surprise, that she hoped I was open to it. She watched my face while she talked, and I watched hers. And I saw what I'd been seeing for weeks now. The small calculations running behind her expression like code scrolling on a screen. She was managing me. She had been for a long time. Are you happy? She asked. It's a lot to process, I said honestly. She reached across the table and took my hand. I let her. The next morning, I called Linda. 2 days later, I accompanied Sandra to her prenatal appointment, sitting in the waiting room with a home renovation magazine while she met with the doctor. On the way out, I told her I'd forgotten something at the front desk and doubled back. I gave the lab technician the sealed envelope Linda had prepared along with Sandra's patient information and a check for the private nip test tan. The technician confirmed what Linda had told me. It was a standard blood draw order, fully legal, no different from any other lab request connected to the existing patient file. 11 days later, the results arrived in my email. I was in Frank's kitchen when I opened them. He watched my face and poured 2 fingers of bourbon without being asked. Probability of paternity for Marcus Webb, 0.0%. Now we know, Frank said. Now we know. What do you want to do with it? I looked at the bourbon in the glass and thought about the bookcase sitting finished in my garage, the dovetails tight and clean, the surface smooth enough to see your reflection in. I built that thing across 3 weeks of quiet fury and grief so total it felt like weather, and it was the best piece of work I'd ever produced. There is something clarifying about working with your hands when your mind is breaking. The wood doesn't negotiate. It only tells you what you actually did. I want to finish this the right way, I said. Sandra's parents and her sister Renee's family were coming to dinner the following Saturday, her mother's birthday, already scheduled weeks in advance. I'd been enthusiastic about it. I'd offered to cook the whole meal. Sandra had seemed moved by that, which told me everything I needed to know about what she expected from me. The evening moved the way those evenings do. Food, conversation, the television on low in the background, the particular warmth of a family that still mostly likes each other. Her parents arrived at 6. Renee and her husband Doug showed up with their twin daughters at 6:15. We ate pot roast and talked about nothing in particular, and her mother opened cards, and Sandra refilled everyone's wine and laughed at her father's stories and touched my arm twice in that easy, familiar way that used to feel like something. After dessert, when everyone had settled in the living room, I excused myself, went to the garage, and came back with a manila envelope. Before the cake, I said, standing in the doorway, I want to share something with everyone, since you're all family. Sandra looked up. Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes went very still. I had a prenatal paternity test run on Sandra's pregnancy. I kept my voice level and quiet. I had practiced this. A non-invasive test ordered through her OB's lab during her last appointment. Fully legal, fully admissible. The results confirm that I am not the father. The room went so quiet you could hear the refrigerator hum. Sandra's mother said, "What?" in a voice that didn't sound like her voice. Sandra stood up. Her face had gone the color of old paint. "Marcus, you had no right to." "The lab ran it twice," I said, still to the room, still calm. "I also have documentation of Sandra's relationship with Kyle Hurst going back 22 months. Photographs, bank records, location data. All legal, all documented." I set the lab results on the coffee table next to the birthday cards. I wanted you all to hear it from me directly, because you're family, and family deserves the truth. Doug said something under his breath. Renee was looking at her sister the way you look at someone when you realize you don't know them as well as you thought. Sandra's father had not moved since I started speaking. He was looking at his daughter with the expression of someone doing a very difficult calculation. When he finally spoke, it was just her name. Nothing attached to it, no anger, no question, just the word itself, dropped into the silence like a stone into water. Sandra sat back down. She didn't argue anymore. She just sat there, and something left her face. The management, the calculation, all the careful machinery she'd been running, and what was left underneath looked very tired and very young. "He doesn't know," she said quietly. "Kyle doesn't know about the baby." "That's interesting," I said, because Kyle has been telling his girlfriend Stephanie that he's completely unattached. I put my phone on the table next to the lab results. Kyle and Stephanie outside a restaurant in Ultua, taken 3 weeks ago. He's been managing both of you the same way you've been managing me, everyone in the dark about everyone else. I picked up my jacket from the chair by the door. I looked at Sandra one last time. She was staring at the photo on the table with an expression I recognized. The look I'd worn in Frank's kitchen when the results came back. The look of someone whose story just ran out of road. "Linda will be in touch Monday," I said. "Happy birthday, Carolyn. The cake's in the refrigerator." I drove to Frank's house. He had the game on and nachos on the table. He handed me a beer when I walked in, and we watched football for 2 hours without talking about any of it, which was exactly right. The divorce moved quickly once Sandra stopped contesting. Linda had everything she needed, and Sandra's attorney clearly knew it. The house went to me. I'd owned it before the marriage and had carried the mortgage alone for years, a fact I'd never thought about twice while we were happy, which turned out to matter enormously when we weren't. The asset division took 3 weeks to finalize, and at the end of it, I walked out of the courthouse with what I'd built and nothing I'd lost. Kyle called me once, about 3 weeks after the dinner. He said Sandra had told him the marriage was effectively over, that I'd known and accepted the situation. He wanted to explain. I let him finish. "Kyle," I said, "I have 47 pages of documentation. Is there anything else?" He didn't call again. The court-ordered official paternity test resolved the remaining question 2 months later. The biological father was a financial advisor named Thomas Gerard. Married, 3 kids, a member of the country club where Sandra had hosted several client events over the past 2 years. A 6-week overlap according to the timeline, before things with Kyle had gotten serious. Thomas hired a lawyer and moved his family to Arizona within a month of being named. His wife filed for divorce the week after they arrived. Sandra ended up at her parents' house for a while, which I was told was not a comfortable arrangement. She eventually got a position at a smaller real estate firm in a different part of town, rented a studio apartment on the south side, and by all accounts was putting together a life that looked nothing like the one she'd planned. I saw her once at the grocery store, about 4 months after the papers were signed. She was moving slowly down the produce aisle, one hand resting on a cart, the pregnancy fully showing now. She looked up and saw me. Neither of us said anything. There wasn't anything left to say that the paperwork hadn't already said more clearly. The insurance settlement covered the shop upgrade I'd been putting off. I hired a part-time assistant, a 24-year-old named Will, who was serious about learning the craft and asked good questions. The Signal Mountain Dining Table Commission came out so well that the clients posted it to their interior designer's Instagram, and I had 4 new inquiries within a week. The work was good. It filled the long hours with something honest and exact. Tam came down for Christmas with Emma, who walked straight out to my workshop the moment they arrived and asked if there was anything she could sand. I gave her a practice board and watched her work, her tongue between her teeth, completely absorbed. "You're doing better than I expected," Pam told me over coffee. "Better than I expected too," I said. "What happened to the anger?" I thought about it. "I did everything right," I said. "I documented it, I filed the papers, I let it run through the right channels. I didn't do anything I'm ashamed of. When you handle something cleanly, there's not a lot of room for it to fester." Pam wrapped her hands around her mug. "Sandra called me, you know. What did she say?" "She asked if you'd ever forgive her." Pam looked at her coffee. "I told her that was between you two and that she should probably get comfortable sitting with the question for a while." I looked out at the workshop at Emma sanding patiently in the winter light. "Tell her I don't hate her," I said. "That's what I've got right now." Sandra called me herself on a cold January evening. I answered on the 3rd ring. She sounded like someone had been up with a newborn, which she had. Her voice was stripped of every layer of performance I'd spent years listening through without realizing it. No management, no calculation, just a tired, honest person on the other end of the phone. "I wanted you to know," she said. "He was born yesterday. He's healthy. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. That's good," I said. "I'm glad he's healthy." "I'm figuring it out." She paused. "Thomas is contributing something. I have work. We're okay?" "Good." Another pause. "Marcus, I'm not calling to ask for anything. I owe you a real apology. Not because I need your forgiveness, because I understand if that's never something you can give, but because I've spent a lot of time in the past 6 months understanding how I became someone who would do this to someone who was good to me. And the honest answer is that I let myself tell a story where it wasn't that bad, where I wasn't actually hurting anyone. And I kept telling it until I believed it, and you deserve someone who never told that story to begin with." I sat in my workshop with the light off, the phone against my ear. The walnut bookcase stood in the corner where I'd finished it. The one I'd started the same afternoon, Emma brought me the iPad. The same afternoon, everything changed. I'd delivered every other commission I'd taken that fall, but I'd kept this one. For months, I didn't know exactly why. I think I know now. "I appreciate you saying that," I said. "I mean it. Are you okay?" "Yeah," I said. "I really am." After we hung up, I sat in the dark shop for a while, looking at the bookcase. The dovetails, each one cut by hand. The surface built up in patient, careful coats. The grain running through the walnut in those long, uninterrupted lines that go all the way through the wood, that nothing can alter or hide, that are always exactly what they are. You don't make something like that in spite of grief. You make it because of it. Because when everything around you is uncertain, you come back to the thing you know how to do, and you do it with everything you have, and at the end, you have something real and solid and yours. Frank's porch light was on across the fence. I'd bring over that 6-pack tomorrow, the good stuff, the kind you open when something is over and something else is just beginning and you need a moment to stand at the border between them. I turned off the workshop light and went inside. I was ready to build something new.